So, the most complex thing about this talk, because I like to keep it simple, is the title. This sounds incredibly complex, but you'll soon find out that's not the kind of girl I am. And I'd like to say well done to the Institute for colour theming me today with their logo, which is pretty cool. I was first. So I'm just going to cover a few things today. Obviously have to have the slide which does credibility, because apparently Rob said it's the thing to do. And then I'm going to talk about AI, the early years. I'll leave you to work out what those things are with Pretty Woman and Judge Dredd. Some of the risks that people talk about, and then some of the experts and what they're saying. But Stephen Hawking, one of our greatest minds who we lost last year, said that AI was potentially the greatest or the worst thing that was going to happen to humanity. And we'll explore a couple of those things today, because it's really rather interesting. In terms of who I am, although I've had that glorious introduction from Danny, thank you, Danny, I'm currently the Cyber Citizen of the Year, which is the work I do with security and protection. And I do quite a lot of work with DCMS and cyber accelerators as well, because I think actually separating what we do with business and stuff like that is a mistake, because I Babel fish a lot for an industry, make things simpler for boardrooms. And also do quite a lot of work in terms of diversity and inclusion, because I'm autistic, and I'm a member of the board for Neurocyber UK, and I wrote the Extraordinary Women book, which is great because it's a bestseller on Amazon, to help more women into our industry. But the reason I'm here today, or the credibility today, is I won the Sparky Baird Award, which is anybody medical here? So, no? Okay, so if you're a doctor, you're a member of the British Medical Association, and if you write in their journal, it's kind of cool. And Signal magazine is the equivalent for the US military. Now, I won that award at a recent event for AFCEA, which is the US military organization. And at that event, I'm going to share some of the senior US military insights, which brings us back to those parts of the nation-state defense. So the early years of AI. Is anybody familiar with Tay? Couple of people. So Tay was Microsoft's go at early AI, and it was supposed to be a teenager, and she was supposed to learn from the good people of the internet. So how do you think that went? Well, unsurprisingly, within 16 hours, she turned into a neo-Nazi, anti-feminist, totalitarian regime fan. So the good people of the internet kind of let Microsoft down a little, but they did learn that you have to account for data integrity and bias when you're building this kind of stuff. And this is going to be a recurring theme, not the good people of the internet, you'll be glad to know. So another example of AI. Is anybody familiar with the Amazon project recently that was canned? Less people. Okay, so Amazon spent 4 years almost trying to get an AI to streamline its recruitment process. So they have a lot of applicants. It's a really cool company to work for. And what they thought was, well, wouldn't it be cool if the AI could kind of weed some of the less desirable ones out and just give us the good ones, yeah? So what do you think 10 years of recruitment looked like in the data for AI? Yeah, mainly white guys. So the AI, which learned from the data, decided that male candidates were obviously preferential, so it started chucking out ones that went to all-girls schools or were women's chess club champions. You know, those undesirable women's chess club champions. So essentially, the developers did try and fix things, but what they realized was the way AI learns is even if they put some kind of algorithm or something to mitigate that bias, the AI had already learned from the data and it would just find another way. So 4 years and a lot of money canned. So those things were kind of funny, weren't they? You know, they're canned, they've gone away, it was embarrassing, but some of this stuff isn't quite so easy to move on from. So the US imprisons more people than any other country in the world. According to the April stats, and I'll read this, Bureau of Justice said by the end of 2016, stats, they're always up to date, aren't they? Nearly 2.2 million adults were being held in prisons, an additional 4.5 million were in other correctional facilities. So that's basically 1 in 38 adult Americans are in some form of correctional supervision. Not all of the ones that count, I hasten to add. But put it another way, when you put AI into judgments, you're affecting a lot of their populace. Now, what they've started to do is something called AI used in criminal risk assessment tools. So it's recidivism scores. I don't know, are you familiar with that? The likelihood of reoffence. So obviously there's some people in the sort of justice system here. Now, what's interesting is just like the other AIs, it's learned from the data. And as you can imagine, there are certain ethnicities of people that tend to get higher sentences. And that data is going into the recidivism scores, and it's recommending higher sentencing. So this can actually affect people's lives to quite some extent, because if it recommends higher sentencing and then they're given higher sentencing, that then goes back into the data, and you've got this spiral that could affect people quite a lot. And unfortunately, I hasten to add, it's not just in the UK. Peter Young of Wired reported quite recently on something called the gangs matrix. I cannot blame police forces at all, I hasten to add, for wanting to do predictive policing. It makes absolute sense. The challenge is the data that those systems are being based on. And to give you some idea, about 1/3 of US police forces are looking at this, and 78% of people on that gangs matrix are young black males, and only 27% of the offenders that do violent gang crime are young black males. There's some disparity there. I'd also like to say that a significant number of those people have never offended that are in that matrix. They're just people that know people that have offended. And the youngest person in there used to be 12, now 13, because he's been in there that long. Now, that is quite shocking. It was very shocking to me when I read it. And when you look at what the AI then suggests, when in terms of where should I go and look for this offender, as you can imagine, it is certain ethnic areas that it's sending police officers to. And guess what? What happens is where you focus tends to be where you find stuff. So this is seriously affecting people. GDPR got involved. Amnesty International got involved, and to quote, they said, a racially biased database criminalising a generation of young black men. Liberty also got involved, and essentially the Mayor of London then said this has got to be fixed. So this is affecting people's lives. There are people that have been turned down for houses, there are people that have been denied benefits, so then they can't potentially feed their families. This is quite serious stuff. So Stephen Hawking, there was a reason that this stuff could be the worst thing. Now, in terms of what the US military are saying, we are moving forward with AI. We're not going to put that genie back in the bottle. So the US military are saying we are milliseconds now away from threat instead of hundreds of miles. Warfare has changed. Warfare has changed forever. This is what Vice Admiral Ancy Norton, Director of DISA Cyber Warfare, said. She's saying that cyber warfare effectively has no borders anymore. The ability to have a regional fight and keep that fight within a region is gone in the world of today and in the world of tomorrow. Incidentally, the Terminator things aren't to scare you senseless. It's just kind of, it's kind of cool. But, but you know, the message is really important. I mean, we as Titania work quite heavily with the US military, and they're seriously looking at how can we have autonomous defence? How can we have defence that reacts in the same way as all the generals running down to a bunker when the missiles fly over? How can we do that with data? Now, what to me is really interesting in this warfare that we're talking about is what, when pushed, AI experts say when lives are on the line. So 3,000 AI and robotics researchers, including 116 founders of leading artificial intelligence companies, influenced a recent key UN decision. They warned about lethal autonomous weapons, and they pledged, quote, never to develop, produce or use lethal autonomous weapon systems. Now, strangely, these are the same researchers that come to InfoSec and come to RSA and go, we can absolutely look after your network 100% secure. But it's not when it comes to this. So either I'm having the great, bearing in mind I'm autistic, so I don't have the shades of grey that some people do have, but I don't. I'm like, there's a disconnect here. Because this is how the AI learns. It doesn't matter whether it's the AI for this or the AI for, defending your networks. That's the way AIs learn. So they learn on data and everything else. So these are people that are experts in their field. They could profit from this technology. And essentially what they're basically saying is, we know how AI works, and it's not ready for this. So my supposition is it's possibly not ready for some of the other stuff as well then. Now I'm hoping that people have seen the Gartner's hype cycle, yeah? I love this thing. I love the hype cycle. So you've got your innovation trigger. AI is born! Yay! Woohoo! And you've got the, it's going to solve everything! I'm not going to have to work, and it's going to do everything I could possibly want. That's where the politicians are still, by the way. I didn't, sorry, that was supposed to be an internal thought. And then the trough of disillusionment, which is where many people are at the moment who've tried this stuff and gone, actually, it's not quite as reliable as we were hoping. I'm probably somewhere on the slope of enlightenment. I actually have firm beliefs that it can do a lot of benefits in terms of productivity, but there are some things that we need to look at. So what Matthew said, who is the director of emerging technologies in Carnegie Mellon, is that we've still got a lot to learn. And trust me when I say, just like Royal Holloway and a lot of other organisations, that's what a lot of researchers are saying. We've still got quite a long way to go before we've really nailed this. So just like with a physical arms race, there is an escalating cyber arms race. And actually, I genuinely believe that automation is the only way that we can go. Because at the moment, automation is on the attacker's side. I think it would be fair to say we haven't got enough people and stuff keeps getting leaked and all they've got to do is push a button and it's like people with washing machines fighting people with rocks in a river. Sorry, but we're the guys with the rocks in the river. Otherwise, we wouldn't keep having all these breaches down to dumb stuff. So automation isn't quite there yet. So what does it currently look like? So we've been doing some work and with our clients and some research that we've done. But essentially, this is where we are, we believe, in terms of network autonomous systems, which is the only thing I'm qualified to talk about. So the accuracy isn't quite good enough. A lot of that is because it's based on probabilistic data. So, I know that there's often a room full of pen testers. There are a lot of false positives and negatives in the tools that you use. Would that be fair to say? So, they attack things, they get the data back, there's an amount of probabilistic analysis in that of where the likely risks are. So a lot of that probabilistic data is what is currently feeding our SIEM systems. That means that we sometimes have a problem with data validation, which can cause issues with the reliability of the data. And then everybody has to go and check everything, which creates alert fatigue, and the volumes go up, and the speed of decisions are relatively fast, but way too painful. So that's kind of where we are now. Where I think I would like us to be, and this is where AI could start to become a lot more powerful, is to start blending in some more deterministic data. So there are things that are already a lot more deterministic. If you're doing a build review, you're going to go and get the running config of, say, a firewall. You're going to look at all the interactions of the settings. That's its instruction set. That's what it's going to do in any given security scenario. And so what we're looking at now with organizations like the Defense Department is bringing in more deterministic data. Because actually, when we can have a lot more certainty around that, then we can validate that data because it's easier to check. We get more reliability. We can put some of the alert fatigue into a lower level. The volume of data can sometimes go down because there's not quite so much traffic to get that kind of data. And the speed of decision actually isn't that different. It just tends to be more reliable. So what that looks like in an enterprise SOAR is more of the data would be deterministic. That would be what the AI would look at. So future systems would be adaptive depending upon what the activity was elsewhere. So that sounds a bit complex. Where we're sort of talking, or where some of the military frame it, is if physical missiles started coming over, all your most sensitive people would go down in a bunker. They wouldn't be as accessible anymore, but their level of protection would go up. So what we're talking here is the same sort of thing, but for data. If you're under attack, level of accessibility goes down, but the data that is most sensitive would be protected. Now, that is not where we are today. We all know that, but that is, I think, where we hope to be in the future. And in terms of self-healing systems, that's the start of autonomous mitigation. So I'm pretty sure that the average network manager would much rather not be spending their time assessing individual firewalls for compliance or security and then spending all their time fixing stuff. I'm sure that the average technical person has better stuff to do than housekeeping. So if we can find a way of doing that reliably, then that means all the probabilistic data where it's more sort of extrapolation and trying to work out logistically if somebody breaks in here, where can they get to, what kind of out-of-the-box things might they do that we haven't already accounted for, can be where you spend your actual time. So then we are using automation versus automation in sensible ways. So what does that mean in terms of can we do this? Because at the moment, there's a lot of people saying they've already done it, but I would suggest that the breaches would say otherwise. This is my immutable formula. I've put Einstein on it to make it look clever, because you know, it's pretty simple when you look at it, but it's an incredibly complex thing to do. I once said that, you know, the last time we did something this complex was when a Kennedy stood and said, we're going to get to the moon in 10 years. And everyone went, yeah, right. There's no Sputniks up there. Like, oh, OK, yeah, we'll do that then. It's a bit like that. I actually think if we don't do this, then a big mega breach is going to make us do it. And it's not just me saying that. There's, you know, S.A. Miller from NCSC saying cyber hygiene is what keeps her up at night. You've got our own Ian Levy, and he is saying, you know, there's going to be a major breach and it's going to be down to something dumb. I may be paraphrasing Ian there, but S.A. I'm definitely quoting. But essentially, for us to trust AI, then there are a couple of things that manufacturers have to do. One, we need to stop acting like the Wizard of Oz. Everything's behind the magic blanket. It's all intellectual property, folks. Sorry, I can't possibly tell you how it's thinking. That's not good enough. If when we'd have been trying to get to the moon, the guidance people had said, sorry, it's all intellectual property, but I am guaranteeing that they're not going to die in space, I'm not sure NASA would have gone, yeah, that's fine. We'll still buy it. So that's one of the things. We need to be able to validate the thinking of AI. So we need to be able to understand if bias is creeping in. We need to be able to understand the impact of the data, and we need to be able to validate that data. Now, actually, that's the same for some of those other projects that failed earlier on, too. You know, the Amazon project, the recidivism project, the one with the gangs matrix. If we're not looking at the data sensibly, then we've got a problem. Because if the data is full of false positives and negatives, then we've got a problem. Because we're going to ask the AI eventually to make decisions for us. So the AI trust triangle, which I tried to make complex by putting Einstein up there, is actually complex because of what it involves our industry doing. Because it involves our industry getting together and working together at a level that they hitherto haven't done. Now, I did mention earlier that I'm a big fan of diversity of all types. And that includes ethnic diversity and gender diversity, background diversity, different types of thinking. And there is a real reason for that. 85% of AI workers and professors are white guys. I've got nothing against white guys. I quite like them. I married one. But that means that we're not getting enough differences in thinking into the room when we're trying to solve these things. And that can lead to us not noticing these biases in the data, or not noticing that there could be a problem that the AI might learn from for 4 years, and then we have to, you know, abandon a couple of £1 million worth of research, aside from the ethical issues. This is just practical business stuff I'm talking about. And I'm quite passionate about the ethical stuff too. So we need to understand AI bias. We need to understand problems with the data. We need to understand problems with who's in the room creating the data and understand how we can mitigate that before we even feed it to the AI. We also need to increase the diversity in the industry around that area. I haven't got the answer to that, but there are people working on it, and I think we need to give them some more budget. For example, in neurodiversity, it currently costs HMRC 32 billion, I believe, or something crazy like that in lost resource and the cost of people sitting at home, because like 86% of neurodiverse, for example, autistic people are just sitting at home even if they want to work. We need to increase deterministic data, which is the stuff where it's repeatable and accurate, and that you know that if A plus B equals C, and it's not going to go sometimes. Where possible, we can replace probabilistic data or use it for other purposes. And we need to be able to validate these decision processes and the data types and the integrity of that data. Because if we don't get this stuff done, then we are going to create an unsolvable problem. We're going to be like Amazon. We're going to do this in our industry and we're going to spend a whole heap of money, and then we're still going to get those breaches, and then we're going to be trying to reverse engineer stuff. And it will just take us longer. We might solve it, but it will take us longer because it will be like the legacy systems of today where we're still trying to get things to work when, you know, people have got XP bedded in. So I'm hoping that this, because it's a short session, has given you some thought. If you want the slides, you're more than welcome, and there's a lot of links in them to all kinds of research and things on AI. So thank you.